Hello, I'm Terry David Mulligan, and this is Mulligan's Do the Podcast. Music, film, food, and wine. Film this week, Forsama. I've been waiting to tell this story for quite some time. You know, some of these podcasts are a giggle because they're fun. This one isn't about fun, friends. This is about the bombing of Aleppo, the outright war against the people of Syria by the government of Syria with the help of, the Russians. Forsama is a very intimate film into the female experience of war. Not the male, the female. It's a love letter from a young mother to her daughter. There are three voices you're going to hear on this podcast. The woman who shot this film, Waad al-Kateab, her husband, a doctor, Hamza al-Kateab, and a British director, Edward Watts, who looked at 600 hours of footage in order to cut this documentary. Forsama won Best Documentary at the Cannes Film Festival, South by Southwest, and 30 other festivals. We're going to take you to Aleppo, where Waad did 5 years of filmmaking, and Hamza did his very best to save the lives of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who were damaged in the bombing. This is a tough film to watch. The most touching part is Waad being pregnant and then having a baby. And she's speaking to Sama on camera, telling her why she stayed, why she got married, and why she had a baby. There are scenes of humanity, compassion, and as Waad says, I'll keep filming. It gives me a reason to be here. You know you're going to see shattered lives. But also what's surprising is you see the Syrian people trying to have spirit and hope. They have weddings. They have meals. At some point, I asked Waad, did you ever think of turning the camera off? Listen for her answer, will you? And truly, if you get a chance, find the documentary Forsama. I'm honored to present filmmaker Waad al-Kateab, her physician husband Hamza al-Kateab, and Edward Watts in conversation from San Francisco. I spent 5 years, the same length of time that you shot your film, being a policeman, a Mountie, and a member of the RCMP in Canada. I saw carnage on a scale I never thought I would ever see, and it taught me how to see bodies broken, blood, car crashes at 100 miles an hour, just the kind of things that policemen have to see and deal with on a day-to-day basis with the nurses and doctors that they work with. So this film came at me. I moved away from the pain and the discomfort and never took my eye off the screen. What I saw in it was hope. Where did that come from? What?
I think it's more about come from yourself as a human being, as someone who can understand what the big decision that we've taken to stay and to fight for everything. It's come because we all find hope in anything we face in our life, whatever the situation was, whatever it was so bad or what the horror that it is. We are always looking for the hope and the positive things in any experience we've went through, and that's hope. The only thing that it stay with us if we face any bad situation.
Hamza, you were a doctor.
Yeah.
You were used to seeing blood and people in pain and death. But did it prepare you for this?
No, not even close. Because, when you prepare for it, you prepare, usually for, I don't know, you can think of, a car accident, something like that. It's like a fight, stabbing, rarely like a gunshot. But with this, with all the kind of other weapons that, the cluster bombs with the very small, shrapnel that just penetrate everywhere in the human body, that, all the crashing incidents, because when people came just under the rubble, it's just just the first time, and usually we just experience something new every while and then when they just decided to try a new weapon.
Hamza, these are just numbers, but I asked them because to give the audience a sense of what you were dealing with, all of you. How many operations?
So many. Like I just can't remember. At the last 20 days only, we've made like more than 800 operation, and it's like just countless. Like I'm talking only about like few days. So like on monthly basis and daily basis, just really countless.
I saw a number that said 6,000 wounded.
Yeah. Also in the last 20 days, we roughly were treating 300 to 350 injuries a day. So it was like at least 6,000 patients in the last 20 days.
So you had to deal with that, but you also had a family. Yeah. You also had a marriage. You also had friends around you. Was that the balance for both of you, for you and Waad? Was the carnage outside and the friends and the almost normal, trying to find a normal life inside the hospital as the bombs fell?
I think it just all together, like it's everything together. They like we believe in what we're standing for. We believe in the justice of just because of a human being claiming to live in his country in dignity, and it's there are so many like scenes you can see in the film, but like in the 5 years of being in Aleppo, like treating like children, treating the women, the civilians. There are so many moments when you just like, for example, like the baby born, like when we managed to rescue that newborn baby and his mother. It will just give you like courage and hope and responsibility to stay there for the rest of your life, just for another moment like this.
I didn't think it was going to be this hard to talk about this, but that's because it pulled me in. It's what great filmmaking does. Edward Watts, first of all, congratulations. I spent the entire summer screening documentaries. It's the golden time for documentaries. There were almost 400 documentaries to screen, but this was the one that stayed with me from the first time I saw it. And I see that the Critics' Choice have nominated you for, both you and Waad, Director of the Year and for Narration of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear you say that as well, that the film meant that much to you.
It started with an uprising, the Arab Spring. Was that the first time Waad, first time you picked up the camera? Was that the reason you picked up the camera?
Yeah, the first time it was at the beginning of the revolution when I was at Aleppo University protesting against Assad regime and the first protests. The first when I was with my mobile phone, and then I start with a handy camera, Sony, small one. And then with the time, my things was like being developed more and more.
You had left home. You were going to university. You fell in love. Congratulations. The conversation that you had, you and Hamza, about getting married, was it near as important as the one about having Sama? Because with Sama, there was a responsibility that was heavy. I wonder how those conversations went.
Like to take that decision that we will be together, me and Hamza, was something so important, and it's not like you can't compare like between this and the decision about keeping Sama or taking her. But without that big decision about you decide to relate your life with another life, that means that to risk everything double now, because you are not just speaking about person who's next to you, but you are speaking about person who's being you now. So it was so big one and big decision. And every one of us, like we've tried to live under that circumstances, thinking about how you can be okay if anything happened to anyone. But when you decide, like, no, now I felt in love in this person, and I'm taking that now as a noun in this life, that means like something different, really.
Yes. Waad, one more question, and I want to talk to Edward for a moment. You explained to the camera, it's brilliant, you explained to the camera, to Sama, you're making this for her. Why you stayed, who you were, what you were fighting for, why you had a baby. I guess all in case you were killed and she grew up an orphan. Is it that raw? Is that what happened?
This was part of the story, but also when I know that we are survived now, and now we are out of Aleppo. Like I needed to keep something very clear for Sama as my daughter, and for any child who was born in that situation. I wanted to keep this for all the world outside to understand, like, what the decision that we've taken and what the situation that we went through. Like, for us, we are not just fighting every day for what we've, not just like the propaganda that we had when we were inside Aleppo by the Russian and by Assad forces, but we are fighting every day that this revolution still exists, and the truth of the human experience which we went through. Like, we needed to keep it in a very simple way for people to understand. And the fact that I'm telling that to Sama, to my daughter, was one of the way of telling the story in very perfect way. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I say it right.
That makes sense perfectly, especially for her. Edward Watts, I know that film, 500 hours of film, did you have any input into the content of that film before you saw it?
Not at all. Like everything, Waad filmed every, I think, something like 99.5% of the film that you see, Waad shot, and she shot everything before we even met. She gathered that archive during her time in Aleppo, and we only met for the first time after the tragic events of the film that you've seen have ended. They were forced to flee. She came to London about 3 months after the fall of Aleppo, and that was when we met for the first time.
Can you tell me, it must be fresh in your mind, as that footage started to roll in front of you and you spent that week or 2 or 3 or however long it took, did you know, could you have understood what you had in that film?
I mean, to be honest, yeah. From minute one, as in the first minute that we really sat down together, the first hour, that Waad and I sat, and she just started doing me the honor of opening her life and showing me her footage, I felt immediately that it was one of the most extraordinary archives, not the most extraordinary archive of documentary footage that I was aware that had ever existed, because right from the start, I saw that she captured, I mean, I've made films in conflict zones before, and so I understand a bit about the human experience in those places, but I'd never seen it captured in the way that Waad's camera had captured it, the spectrum of human life, the fact that there was humor in there, that there was love, there was all the best things about human beings, as well as all the suffering and the carnage and the horror of that. And to see that captured on film, to see these incredible human beings and these characters at the heart of it, to know that her story, her filming covered this whole journey of the story of the Syrian revolution, which is something that I've been very passionate about and very engaged with since it began. I really felt from the beginning that this was, it should be an incredible film, and that we had a responsibility to do justice to what she'd achieved.
Edward, I think you may agree with this, but any film about war is in fact a war film, no matter what side it falls on, except when its narrator and camera operator is held by a woman.
Indeed. I think, the female perspective that Waad brings and the female instincts that she brought to her filmmaking and to her camera work are unique and something that we've never seen before. Because, as a man who's been in those conflict zones, and I know I speak for my colleagues, how often we gravitate towards the front lines and towards the bombs going off and what appear to be the sort of most dramatic scenes. But what Waad showed, and what I think her female instincts as a female filmmaker brought to this, was that actually conflict is expressed in the experience of human beings just like us in these situations, and that actually you learn a hell of a lot more by the struggle to put food on your family's table than you do necessarily about, the push and pull on a front line. And I think, yes, that's one of the things, that is the thing that makes this film so special.
Thank you, Edward. Hamza, tell me how Waad changed in those 5 years. What were the changes that you saw?
Most important thing was like not the way she was filming, but like the stories she was capturing. Like the first, I think, year, she was like focusing, I think, on the like trend incidents when there was like only the shelling or something just happened, like the main incident, and then after that just evolved to capture the whole life of the people there. So I think she just realized that this is the part of the conflict that nobody has covered.
Waad, can I ask you, when you turned on the camera each day, did you have a plan, or did you just let the day play out in front of you?
When I was there and I knew that I don't know what will happen in front of my eyes, but I know exactly that how I need to take all the details of what's happening. So it was more about the content, what was in my mind more about how I can take like that wide and the close-up and the details behind every story I've seen, and follow more than what just it's appear in front of my eyes.
Yes, but you wanted to show the whole spectrum. It wasn't just the bombing and the carnage and the death and the injured. You wanted to show meals and kids and school and play and family. Was that important to you as well, just to maintain a balance?
Yeah, of course. Like what was happening during that year, it was all like I followed the things that it amazed me and make me feel a lot of strange like feeling. One of the main things was really the resilience that I felt that we have and people around us, especially like Salem and Afra family, and there's many other people who I filmed, but it wasn't, there was no space in the film to put them out. But it's really very great feeling, and sometimes very bad, of course, because of the situation. But all this makes me like open my eyes more and my heart also to the situation, and kept me film a lot of details of that life, hoping that one day it will be out in one way or another.
Waad, did you ever look away or turn the camera off?
In every like scene or things, it's more horror. I was more scared, but I've never thought that. Like maybe I thought that, yeah, I want to turn it off and like just go. But I was always like keep filming. Just the fact that I know that I could be killed now or after 1 minute. It gives me a lot of feeling that I need to continue whatever my feeling was. I need to ignore all the fears that I have and focus on the importance of filming this material. And actually one of the scenes which is, until now, I don't really, I still surprised how I kept filming that was the baby born scene.
The baby born.
Because in many seconds, I wanted to turn the camera off and just leave. And at that time, I had Sama. She was around 4 months. And I'm filming a baby who was just born, and he was born killed, dead because of an airstrike. So I felt so bad when I was filming that baby. But in every time I wanted to turn the camera off, I was telling myself that, no, this is so important. I need to film more, to take the whole details more. Even to film this scene and this story in very perfect way as a filmmaker. And suddenly the baby opened his eyes and I captured that great moment of the life. So I'm until now I'm still surprised how I could continue doing this, even if I know that that's a very horror scene. But I'm so glad that I was strong enough to keep filming that.
Thank you, Waad. Thank you for sharing that. I have a question for Edward Watts. I saw a review from Guy Lodge in Variety, and he said this film is simple in concept and shattering in execution. That is a remarkable feature. That's why it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's an astonishing film.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think we feel very fortunate that we've had such an incredible response from critics and audiences. When we were making it, a lot of people said that, the world has seen enough films about Syria and people are exhausted by Syria. And I think the reaction to it from audiences, from festivals in Mexico to South Africa to Sheffield in England to across America, to the DMZ, the festival over in Korea, we've seen people engaging with the film, loving the film, just so engaged in Waad and Hamza and Sama's story and being moved by it and feeling passionately engaged in what's happening in Syria. And it just really, gives us hope, I guess, makes us feel that we did justice to their story and to the incredible footage that Waad captured. And just so honored really that it's having this effect on people, because one of the things that I say is this is a film for everyone at the moment with the world in the state that it's in. I don't think there's a single country that isn't being racked by some kind of turmoil at the moment, whether it's from Hong Kong to Brexit Britain to Iraq to all of these places around the world, to our own political situation here in the States and in Canada. I guess, I don't know, you guys are always reasonably calm. But I mean, this is a film for these days in particular, because it's a film about all the best things about human beings. It's about how our love and courage and humanity can withstand the turbulence and the violence, that dark forces would throw against us. And for that reason, we're just so happy to see it going around the world and touching people in this way.
What's going on in Syria now must be pulling at you. Are you staying in touch? What's actually happening in Aleppo?
It's you can't really separate yourself from what's going on, and you can't just say, "Oh, now I'm out. I can't do anything," and we're just watching this. You need to find a way to keep going, and the film is one of the things which is we are keep in touch with them, and we are trying to build a movement following the film. Now, east part of Aleppo and the west too is both under the regime control, supported by their alliance, the Russian, and the situation in East Aleppo. We don't know a lot of contact in that place. because that's also a lot of dangerous for them if they keep in touch with us. But we knew that the situation in east part of Aleppo is still very bad as we left. And even the regime, like, I don't know if that's kind of punishment or what the regime really want to do, because, like, you can't trust them and you can't really knew what the truth of what's happening because they are controlling the whole area. But, like, there's still east part of Aleppo without any services, which is still, like, so bad. But what the people who we stayed in touch with is the people who we left altogether from Aleppo, where they live now in a city called Idlib, which is the last area out of the regime control.
Right.
It's northwest Syria. And this place, it's became like really the last survival area for anyone who want to live out of the regime control. So people who were displaced from Aleppo, there's another two cities who were displaced called Ghouta and Dar'a. So these people who living in that area, where we supposed to be live if we didn't leave, this area is still under bombardment and under shelling, and like hospitals still being targeted by the Russian and Assad forces, and schools, and just the situation there is so bad because there's no other place to go to if you want to flee that area. And it's just like so difficult and so exhausted and disappointed that this is still happening until now.
Has the world moved on, or has Fosama kept this story alive? Anybody want to finish with that one?
I'm so proud and happy that I feel like, yes, that Fosama now is bringing Syria back to the news and bringing people understanding and caring about Syria. Unfortunately, that we still need to keep fight every day to tell the world that this is still happening, and there's people who's being killed and being killing every day by the Russian and Assad forces, and this is like didn't finish yet. But I'm so happy that we can do this in Fosama and seeing the reaction of the people every day about what can we do, and give us that chance now to do the impact campaign, which is called Action Fosama.
Yep.
It's like I feel like this is the only way for me to stay alive, is to keep fighting in this now.
Well, just to add, as Waad was saying, we do have this impact campaign, so we hope that your listeners will follow our website, Fosama Film, which is the film's website, and where we'll be publishing news on the campaign as we launch in a couple of weeks of Action Fosama, which offers the opportunity for people to, as individuals, do things to help, raise awareness about Syria, keep talking about Syria, as Waad says, trying to keep the pressure up on governments and on diplomats to keep trying to find a solution that helps the civilians of Syria, who are being pounded from so many different angles at the minute. The one thing that this film shows is how much shared humanity we have with them, even though they're living in circumstances that we can't even imagine. And so, we hope that through Action Fosama, it's an opportunity to build a movement of people around the world to try and help.
Thank you for doing this, all three of you. I love you for sitting and talking to me. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Mulligans do the podcast in conversation with Waad al-Kateab, Hamza al-Kateab, and Edward Watts, who collectively made the documentary Fosama. Waad spent 5 years shooting above and below ground as the bombing continued every day in Aleppo, Syria. They survived. She got out. She's having a life. She's a wonderful filmmaker. They're trying to rebuild Aleppo, but you have to keep in mind, the government that bombed its own people is still in power. If you would like to assist this production, there's a website called, and a Facebook page called Action Fosama, S-A-M-A, Action Fosama. If the message on those pages resonates with you as it did with me, offer your assistance. Thank you. Next week on Mulligan's to the Podcast, the fireball known as Miranda Mulholland has a new album, a new tour, and will not be denied. Miranda Mulholland next week on Mulligan's to the Podcast. Thank you for subscribing on Spotify, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts.